My name's Macleod from Indie Authors World, and I am absolutely delighted to have the very lovely Mr. Stephen Shainbart with us here today. Or should I say doctor, perhaps? Is that the professional term we should use?
Whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, Stephen, it's lovely to have you here. And I want to say, first of all, congratulations on publishing your book, which is called I Actually Did It, Becoming Canadian Because of Trump. So well done. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you. It feels good to have it done.
So we're going to have a little chat about some of the concepts behind the book and some of your experiences to share with the audience. So I just wanted to start. The book is a mix of part biography, part how-to guide to move to Canada, a bit of social commentary on the state of the USA, and some comments around Trump. But you've also shared some of your own very personal experiences as well. So, so for everybody who's watching, it is a great book. Definitely go and read it if you're interested in any of those topics. But if we go back, I suppose, to 2016, when Trump was elected, and it was, you've shared in the book that that was really a pivotal moment, for you, and you've shared some of your experiences and thinking around what was happening in the United States in the book. What was it that really got you thinking seriously, though, about moving to Canada?
Well, I was serious about it in that I said to myself, well before the election, if this guy wins, I'm going to have to consider the option of moving to Canada. That I would have to explore whether that was a possibility. I was hoping he would not win, but in my New York City bubble, everyone said, don't worry, he's definitely not going to win. And I thought he could win. He probably won't, but he definitely could. And if he does, then I'm going to have to look into the possibility of moving to Canada. And so when the election results came in that night, I thought, well, here it is. I'm going to have to look into this. And I had a long phone call actually with my sister about it. And could I really pursue this seriously? And I said, but I also have a son, a 15-year-old son in New York. And I thought, I don't know if I can leave because of that. But I was so concerned about the country and the future, and also his future. And my sister said, listening to you, it sounds like you've already made up your mind. You know what you have to do. And she knows me well. And she was right. I just needed to hear that. And that was it. So I kind of had it in my mind before the election, but I was hoping it wouldn't turn out the way it did. But it did.
But it did. Yes, it did indeed.
Yes.
And it did indeed that the Canadian immigration website actually crashed.
Yes.
Because so many others were, as you were, thinking about the same thing.
Right. Yeah. It was led by all this web traffic coming from the United States that caused it to crash that night. Right.
But so many other people didn't follow through on that. So I suppose I'm curious about what was it that allowed you to really commit and do it? Why are you different?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say that the reason I called it I Actually Did It, I didn't think of that title, but as I went around and as the years went by, 2017, 2018, and I kept telling people that I had been working on becoming a Canadian because of Trump, and I was in Canada, and people said, oh, I've heard about people saying they were going to do that, but you're the first person I met that actually did it. And they would just say that phrase over and over again, like, you're the first person that actually did it. And finally, one of my colleagues and friends just said, why don't you just call the book I Actually Did It? And I was like, that's perfect, because that's what happened. So why? I began to think about that because I thought many, many people were going to accompany me, but very few did. And I thought, well, why me? And I talk about that in the book, and several reasons. Two of them are very personal, but I expand on them in the book. And one is about my mother having narcissistic personality traits and disorder. And she's wired her very similarly to, I think, the way Trump is, in that he puts himself first before the needs of others, or can't even often really feel them or think about them very much. And he experiences other people more as a reflection on him than who they are for themselves. And so I didn't want to, once again, like I was as a kid, be under the administration of a narcissistic governing body, whether it's a parent or president. Not that I was a child and he's not my parent, but in the sense that a president does have power over the well-being of the lives of its citizens, as we're seeing now by the mismanagement of the coronavirus and other issues. And I didn't know about the coronavirus then, but I knew that he was the kind of person that could mismanage a crisis that way because of his personality and character flaws. And the other reason is, personal reason, is that my father is a Holocaust survivor. His father was murdered in Auschwitz. I'm named after my grandfather. And I know, in a way, growing up firsthand, hearing these stories in my family, that democracies can die and that countries can go crazy and become very destructive. And Germany was a democracy, and the people voted in Hitler. And once he took power, he started becoming more authoritarian and repressive. And so it wasn't like a military coup. The people chose him. And I don't think, let me be clear, I don't think Trump is nearly as bad as Hitler. That's not my point. My point is that democracies can often destroy themselves, and bad things can happen, and the people's judgment isn't always good. It can be terrible. And I know that things just aren't always just going to be okay, no matter what. I don't see why that is. History is replete with examples of things being good functioning countries and then deteriorating into disasters. And I just thought, I'm going to be proactive about this and get a backup option and look into the possibility of becoming a Canadian citizen as well.
So just to pick up then on your personal experiences and your reflection, I suppose, on your history, your family's history, are maybe some things that other people did not then consider.
Right.
You also had a personal connection to think about this maybe in a deeper way than others who thought that they wanted to move, but maybe didn't have that deep conviction within themselves.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it isn't like I thought of these ideas. There are books written. There's a book called How Democracies Die, came out, and there are books about, certainly people comment on his personality and his tendencies towards narcissism. That's very well known, but I think I may have felt them more deeply, having had personal experiences with destruction that both of those things, the narcissism in a leader and the what happened in the Holocaust and what happened in Germany and how that democracy can fall apart. Those I felt very keenly. They were very real to me. They weren't just things you read about in a book. But at one point I wrote that it's as close as my father's tears, when Germany fell apart and what he went through. So, yeah.
Thanks. So I just wanted to then sort of move on a little about some of there were quite a lot of hoops that you then had to jump through.
Yes, there were.
To become Canadian. Yes. And, we're not going to give them all away because we want people to actually to go and read what you've written. But
also we don't have like 5 hours to describe all of them.
Yeah. What do you think was the craziest one that you had to go through?
I've been thinking about this, and it's really a tie. It's hard to pick. Certainly one was that I was working, I spent a year qualifying for the Ontario College of Psychologists, the licensing board, to become a registered psychologist in Ontario so that I could work in Canada. I needed to get 1 year of Canadian work experience to become a permanent resident. So to get that first, I had to become registered as a psychologist. So that took almost a year just to become, have my credentials transferred. It was very bureaucratic. Then I had to work for a year after getting registered to complete the requirement for permanent residency. So I worked for a full year in Ontario as a fully registered psychologist, so 2 years. And then when it came time to apply to become Canadian, I had to submit to the government that I was all these documentations going back years and decades, that I was indeed, in fact, a psychologist. After working for a year as a psychologist in Canada, they didn't care. It's like, God forbid that one branch of the bureaucracy should communicate with another one. They just charge you money and make you wait months while they process things. So that's one of the just insane things. One of the more kind of funny, weird things is my application was delayed several months because they said there was a shadow on my chest x-ray. You have to get a physical exam, which I understand. But they just sent it back after holding onto my application for 3 months, and they sent it back saying, there's a problem with your medical results. They didn't say what it was. I had to go back to the doctor. I went back to the doctor. They said, there's a shadow on your chest x-ray. You have to get another chest x-ray. So I went, I had to make an appointment, wait more weeks for the exam, the results, everything. And turns out, and when they did all of that, and this is a 3-month delay, turns out that the shadow on my chest x-ray was not cancer, it was not a growth, it was my left nipple. So they couldn't tell the difference between a nipple and something else, and for that, my application was delayed by 3 months. So that's probably the two most outrageous things. You think in a more efficient process they would be able to overcome.
And just to clarify for anybody who's watching or listening, you had actually been working as a psychologist for many years before you had to cut to these 2 years.
Yes. In 20 years, I worked for about 20 years in New York as a licensed psychologist in private practice. I had been teaching, I had been supervising, and they are actually, when it came time to get registered as a psychologist in Ontario, that 1 year where I had credentials transferred, they said that they messed up. They miscalculated my paperwork, my number of hours on my internship from 1989, and then they said that, well, it's more difficult because you have more experience. Your years go way back before there was records were computerized, so it's more difficult that it's on paper. So it's more. It would have been much better if you were a recent graduate. And I said, wait, let me get this straight. You're saying I'm going to have a harder time getting approved to be a psychologist in Ontario because I actually have been in the field longer. So your whole process, which is making sure I have enough experience and training, favors people with less experience and training who are recent graduates. And she said, yes, that's correct. Just like that, yes. And I said, that makes no sense. And she said, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. She said, well, that's the way we do it. So yeah, that was, I guess that it's a tie between those three. Being considered a psychologist after working in Canada for a year, being kind of discriminated against because I have more experience as a psychologist by the board, by the organization that's supposed to see whether I have enough experience, and the last thing I just told you.
So you had to battle through a lot.
Oh well, the last thing I repressed, it wasn't that. The last thing was that I have a left nipple. That was also. Yes.
And possibly a right one as well, but who knows?
Yeah, but I don't want to. I want them to know. I have enough. It'll be another 3-month delay. So keep that between you and me.
We will indeed. So apart from the bureaucracy, what are you enjoying about living in Toronto then?
Yeah, a lot. It's just being here after living in New York my whole life is very pleasant. It's nice to. My son came up here and he said, he lives in Brooklyn and he's a Brooklynite, and he said, I love going away to Toronto and visiting you. It's so soothing. It's like going away to the country. It's so peaceful and relaxing. And Toronto, of course, is a great metropolis here, but compared to New York, it's just quieter. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's got a lot of what New York has, but without the insanity. It's not full of giant garbage bags on the sidewalk. There's very few rats. There's very few cockroaches, things that are just normal in life in New York. There aren't sirens every second. When I hear a siren here in Toronto, I feel homesick. I feel, oh, the sounds of home. And so it's just more pleasant while still having the diversity of New York and the, it's still fun and interesting, but I don't feel like I've been through a battle getting from one place to another or just walking around. It's actually enjoyable. And riding the subway is actually a soothing experience. Nobody talks. It's the complete opposite. It's I call them moving libraries. Everyone just sits there, and I can relax. And it's amazing to be able to relax and not, be interrupted with constant panhandling and music blasting and just that. It's very nice.
Hmm. So you don't regret moving then?
No. And another thing I wrote in the book is that I've lived only one place my whole life, in New York, 56 years. So New York's a great place. Don't get me wrong. It's great. And if I had to live in one place for that long, New York is a really good place to live because it has so much to offer. But it's still one place. And I think I wrote, when you live in New York, the world comes to you, but you don't come to the world when you live there. So, it's nice for me to be just somewhere different. And a lot of people don't understand that. But when I walk down a block in Toronto, I don't know what's down that block. And it's very exciting for me. Not because it's objectively more exciting, but it is for me because I know New York like the back of my hand. And I love that I don't know what awaits me down the block in my new home.
Yeah. That's the excitement of moving to somewhere new.
Yeah, most people have had that, but I didn't, and now I do.
So what are you missing then about New York? Not just the sirens and the cockroaches and the rats. Then what are you missing most about New York?
Yeah, I was thinking. Well, first I miss, although they're still not doing well, I miss the New York Mets because I'm a big fan. Although the Blue Jays are doing better and will probably be in the playoffs. So that's good. It's good having two teams because one of them might not lose. And also, I miss the directness and straightforwardness of New Yorkers compared to the reservedness and politeness, sometimes over politeness, of Canadians. And I went home. I hadn't been away this long in my whole life. After 5 months, I went back to New York, and the taxi driver pulled up to my Airbnb from the airport, and he was demanding that I go to the ATM and get him his tip in cash. I didn't have cash. And I said no, and we started arguing, and he said yes, and I said no. And while we're going on with this, the car behind us starts honking, and then the guy yells out in the car behind me and says, move your bleeping car. And then something to do with rear end hole, but not quite that word. And I thought, I'm home. I just smiled. I thought I'm back in my culture, like where people just, they certainly express themselves and directly. And there's something very refreshing about that. So I miss that. Yeah. As opposed to sometimes I make silly jokes with some of these Torontonians and to just loosen them up a little bit and see what happens. I have some stories in my book about that. See if they have smoke coming out of their ears if you joke around too much.
I think, for those that are listening, they might realise that my accent is not either from New York or Toronto, that I'm actually in Scotland. And I think there's some similarity from sort of Glaswegians and New Yorkers. I think that the sort of Glasgow and New York are a bit of, right. There's a kind of grittiness, I think, that's there in the city.
Right.
Edinburgh.
I think I told you right about it. I had a friend that was from Scotland. She said a funeral in Glasgow is more fun than a wedding in Edinburgh.
Yeah. Right. So it's kind of, I think we've got some
sounds like New York and Toronto, but I'm exaggerating it. There are people here. There are boring people in New York and fun people in Toronto. It's not, it's a generalization, of course.
Yeah. So if we can I come back to Trump's narcissistic tendencies then?
I can't get away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking about, obviously the next election's coming up very soon. Have you got a sense of hope for the future for the kind of American society with where they are just now with Trump, or what's your thoughts now, looking at it slightly from an outside point of view, perhaps even living in Canada now?
I don't feel overall hopeful. I mean, I think the only thing that's hopeful is that, as far as polls can tell, Biden is in a position to more likely win the election, but as we learned in 2016, anything can happen. But first of all, even if he wins, I'm still not that hopeful. Of course, it would be a lot better. But I think Trump is as much a symptom of a problem in the United States as he is the cause of a problem. And a lot of people say, well, won't it be unnecessary to have moved to Canada? Wouldn't you have been foolish? Because if he loses, everything will be fine and everything will go back to normal. And I don't agree with that at all, because Trump is a symptom of the problems also. The 40% of the people that support him no matter what will still be there. Who could the American people elect in the future if they could elect someone of such bad characteristics this time? Someone even worse could come along. And also, there's very real possibility that Trump will refuse to accept the results of the election, even if he does lose, and will really whack away at the foundations of democracy. We've never had a leader, I think, who will put himself over the country, and we do now, who doesn't really believe in democracy, but believes only in his own gain. He has his consistent history in his lifetime of doing that. And there's every reason to think, even if he loses, that he's not going to go quietly. He's going to rip away at the foundations of democracy and make tension divide the people. And there could be a lot of chaos, and it could be the beginning of the great unraveling of the country. Maybe not, but it's certainly really plausible. It's happened in other countries before, and the United States was not granted some kind of waiver or immunity that other countries, where it could happen again.
Yeah.
Or either quickly or slowly over time. It could be just slowly disintegrate. Maybe not with one big bang, but just get worse each year. Who knows? I'm not hopeful overall.
So if there are many other people now sitting thinking that maybe Canada is a good option for them, what advice would you give to anybody who's maybe thinking that Canada might be a choice? How could they start?
Well, I think they should first realize that, because I think a lot of people don't, that it's not so easy. It's actually difficult, and it may not even be possible for some people. I think many Americans, not all, they tend to think of Canada as sort of our attic or something. It's kind of that way, like, where you put stuff you don't need away up there where it's cold and, there's a lot of space, like an attic. But it's its own country, and it actually has very strict immigration policies. And in some ways, it's a lot stricter than the U.S., surprisingly enough, where you have to prove that you can qualify for their rules and add and contribute to the Canadian economy. I got in, there are different programs, but I got in under a program called Express Entry, and because I had a PhD and I speak English well, which is a plus for many Americans, but there are many things, if I was younger, I would have had an easier time getting in. What I'm saying is that it's not so easy, and some people just won't be admitted. And it's also a long process. So it isn't just, you just don't pack up and move there. It's hard. So my advice is to first consider that. And then if you're really serious about it, get an immigration attorney and get a professional consultation, because it is a Byzantine and complicated process. And I was totally confused and befuddled by it. And I don't think I'm a dummy. And I just think that get help. It's the best money you'll spend. At least get a consultation with someone to say whether you have a shot at it or not. Just don't assume, oh yeah, I'll just go to Canada, it'll be easy. It's not like that.
Yeah. But I think your book would be a good place for people to start, because you've explained the pitfalls and the trials and tribulations that you had
in a personal way. It's informative, but it's also what you go through as a person, not just a dry sheet of paper.
Yeah. So if you could turn back the clock now, going back to when you were just thinking about moving to Canada, and know all that it took for you to actually get through, would you do it again?
Yeah, I even wrote about that in the book. The answer is I honestly don't know. I did not think it was going to be as difficult as it was. I think for many people it won't be as difficult for me. I had to get that 1 year of work experience. If I was younger, I would not have. It would have been quicker. And I had to fly back and forth constantly between New York and Toronto. Many people don't. They can just apply and wait to see if they get admitted. But in my case, it really cost much more time and money than I ever expected. And then when I was in it so far, people said, well, why don't you just give up? And I had spent over a year of time and money, and what would be the point of giving up? I said, I'm seeing this through. So now I'm on the other side, and I have it, and I'm very relieved, and I'm glad. And so I'm glad I did it. Had I known it was going to be as hard as it was for me, I don't know. But now that I did it, and I don't have to do it anymore, I actually did it. I'm very happy, because will be hopefully forever. I'll always be part of the Canadian as well as part American.
So great way to end our chat. So thank you so much, Stephen. So where can people find out more about you?
Well, let's see, I have a website for the book. I actually did it.com. I was very glad to see that was not taken. No exclamation point, just I actually did it.com. And there's a little bit about me there, and a little about me on the Amazon or the author page selling the book. And I also have my private practice website on the psychological side. So.
Yeah. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting to you about this book, and I really wish you lots of success. And I'm sure that everybody who, if they're thinking at all about moving to Canada, they must read you this book, or if they just want to know a little bit more about your experiences, because it is funny. I mean, that's the other thing as well. I think I should point out that there is some humour in your stories, and I think that even it's an enjoyable read. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Bye.
Bye.